Number 14 on our list is the Indiana Hoosiers. And Trey, in our darling segment that was very popular with the people, you had the Indiana Hoosiers going to a bowl game. I kept doing some research. I wasn't on that bandwagon with you. I could squint. I like Indiana. I put out a tweet the other day saying, you know what? Indiana is not going to be as bad as people think they're going to be, with Curt Cignetti taking over, a lot of talent infused, a lot of athleticism infused into that team. And then lo and behold, I'm reading in Phil Steele's preview, and he's got them going 7-5 and comfortably making a bowl game. Explain how that's possible.
Well, we talked about it with Jonathan Smith at Michigan State, but it's the same situation at Indiana, minus the just sheer embarrassment of the previous coach. Indiana was down in the dumps, and Kirk Cignetti coming in from James Madison, bringing in a ton of new talent. I mentioned last year they're only returning, 2 or 3 total starters that were on the team last year.
Yeah, 2.
But from guys that have started at an FBS program before, it's 10 on offense and all 11 on defense. All 11 of their starters will have started somewhere in the FBS. It's a ton of experience. And I think that, Kirk Cignetti coming in, the man knows how to coach. Tom Allen seemed like, a really nice guy, but he was always on the verge of being fired and saved his career with a 6-6 or 7-5 season. It seems like he was on the hot seat for probably 5 or 6 years. Yeah. But Kirk Cignetti knows how to coach everywhere he's been. We saw what he did with James Madison, getting them up to speed in the FBS level in a way that no team has ever had. James Madison transitioned better than any team ever has from FCS to FBS. And now he's bringing a lot of talent from that team to the Big Ten in Indiana. Kalen Black, Elijah Surratt, Zach Horton, a ton of guys. Miles Price from Texas Tech. Yep. And the key linchpin is Curtis Rourke, guys. We ranked him as a top 5 quarterback in the entire conference on our Big Ten quarterback rankings episode. I know we were hyping him up last year when he was at Ohio, gets hurt in the first game against San Diego State in week 0. It just kind of derails the whole season for him, but the talent's there. He was getting legit NFL draft looks last year preseason before the injury. And now he gets another chance on the biggest stage. Curtis Rourke is a guy that could have gone to a lot of Power 5 schools, but he lands with Kirk Cignetti at Indiana. I think there's a reason for that. I think that he believed in what was being built, and Kirk Cignetti certainly believes he can build an offense around him. So the biggest storyline, you wrote this, Mitch, is where's the defense coming from? Because they returned, like I said, a lone starter from last year, but they were 98th in scoring defense. So to me, when I see you're only returning one starter from a 98th ranked scoring defense, I can spin that to a positive very, very easily, that you needed some new blood in there. So they have their work cut out for them. The linebackers are going to be coming together with Aiden Fisher, the Mike last year from James Madison coming in to anchor that defense. Secondary is going to be a big, big question mark. So we'll see how they can react to that. When I look across their schedule, though, not a ton of teams that I feel like will really punish a bad secondary, especially early on. The critical stretch is certainly what's going to define if they make a bowl game is the 4-game stretch of UCLA to Northwestern early on, because they have to stack wins early. FIU and Western Illinois at home to start, but then that 4-game stretch is at UCLA, Charlotte at home, Maryland at home, and at Northwestern. If they can go 3-1 there, I feel really confident about my projection of making it to the bowl game. If they can catch UCLA by surprise, or if they can upset Maryland at home, I'm feeling really good about the projection to make it to a bowl game. The close is really difficult, though.
Yeah.
The close, it's going to be hard to find. It's going to be hard to find wins, and you're going to honestly hope that a couple teams on the back half of the schedule are worse than advertised, or maybe worse than the preseason prognostications.
Yeah.
Nebraska and Washington, I like that both are at home, but those are going to be 2 difficult games to win. At Michigan State is a clear opportunity for me. Michigan and at Ohio State, I don't think we even need to discuss that possibility. And then the rivalry game against Purdue at home, a game that they've really struggled in recently. So it's there. It's possible. And I think, if you can Ted Lasso it and fully believe in what Kirk Cignetti's got going, you can see the path, but it's going to be difficult. I like it. I'm going to stick with it, and they're going to hit the over at 5.5.
I love the wide receivers that Indiana has. You mentioned Miles Price, a Texas Tech transfer. Elijah Surratt was a 1,000-yard receiver last year. Kalen Black toting the rock out of the backfield. There's a
Donovan
lot to
McCulley
like.
coming back. The one guy came back is Donovan McCulley, who had a nice season.
Exactly. So there's a lot to like on the Hoosiers offense. They've got to completely rebuild the defense, but if they can, I'll be honest. I think it's more possible than I initially gave the Hoosiers credit for to go bowling. I know that home field, the good brand, would love to see their beloved Hoosiers back in the postseason. Maybe Kurt Signetti said it best. He said when asked about his message to recruits, he said it's pretty simple. I win. Google me.
He
So you
does.
like that kind of confidence, leading the pack for sure. So we'll see if Indiana can make it to a bowl game. At number 13 on our list is the UCLA Bruins. Yeah, if you look at the record, you'd never know that it felt like the sky was falling at multiple times last year for the Bruins. They go 8-5. It was 4-5 in conference, but following a 17-7 loss to Arizona State, we're ready to kick Chip Kelly out of the building. He's going to get fired. We're on the coaching search. And then he goes and beats UCLA to seemingly save his job, only to get destroyed at Cal a week later. Chip Kelly
Beats USC.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. He beat USC and then they lost to Cal.
Yeah.
Not sure what I said, but yes, beat USC. That was critical. But then Chip Kelly decides, you know what? I don't really like being head coach. Recruiting is overrated. I'm going to go be the offensive coordinator at Ohio State. And he leaves the program. So we've got a new man at the head, in a first-year head coach, too. They elevate their running backs coach in Deshaun Foster. No head coaching experience whatsoever at the Division I level, but he's going to give it a try this year. They lost a lot. Laitu Latu is gone to the NFL. That really hurts. Carson Steele also gone to the NFL. Their leading rusher from a season ago. They lose D'Anton Lynn, their defensive coordinator, who had them as I believe it was a top 10 total defense. Yeah, they ranked 10th in total defense last year. He's the architect behind that. He leaves for USC and is gone to their crosstown rival. You lose your 5-star true freshman quarterback in DeAndre Moore. He goes up to, or Deontay Moore. He goes up to Oregon to sit on the bench behind Dylan Gabriel. So UCLA is in a really tough spot because the transfer portal, I think, is what Chip Kelly was really using to kind of sustain that program. And they've got some nice pieces. Jacob Busic comes in from Navy. He's going to be fun to watch off the edge, but there's not a ton that I really like about UCLA this season. Going forward, maybe, DeMarcus Davis transfers in from Washington. He appears to be the quarterback of the future. Rico Flores is a nice wide receiver that transferred in from Notre Dame. But for me, the storyline for UCLA is seeing what Foster can do in year one, right? Not many coaches get a Power 4 opportunity in their first ever head coaching job. So for UCLA, who, their schedule is interesting. It's tough at the very beginning. They've got road tilts with LSU. They've got Oregon. They've got a road game at Penn State. The back half of their schedule is at Nebraska, Iowa, at Washington, USC, and Fresno State, who I don't think is going to lay down either. So, I don't know that I'm in on UCLA this year. The over-under is 5.5. I'm having a hard time believing that they can get to the postseason in year one. I just think it's too much new going on for a program that, quite honestly, guys, hasn't really been that serious about football in quite some time. At least those were the rumors, right? Under Chip Kelly, there didn't really seem to be the investment from the head coach. The administration and the athletic department certainly wasn't investing in football as heavily as USC, for instance, or Oregon or Washington. And so for me, and I think for a lot of people, when UCLA was, coming along with USC in this first edition of expansion, I think we all kind of expected UCLA to maybe get left behind in the dust a little bit. And based on what I'm seeing from, the offense and just a few returners on defense, they're going to be a fine football team. But there's nothing that stands out to me as this is their calling card in 2024.
Yeah, well, and being a fine football team once upon a time was going to be okay, right? You could do that if you were still playing the Pac-12, but you're in the Big Ten now, and you're going to play a lot more consistent talent than you would, some of those kind of off weeks, like you have those soft teams in the Pac-12. Obviously, not all of them, but there's weeks you can take off in the Pac-12. You just can't do it as much in the Big Ten. Mitch, you're onto something here. I think Deshaun Foster is going to be a good coach, but you didn't even say offensive coordinator. You just said running backs coach. He's making a big jump in a year one, and this is going to be tough. Like, this is going to be a tough year to do that. Number one, because you lose your offensive and defensive masterminds that, turned your program into, the respectable program it was. But you're also losing a lot of talent. And, oh, yeah, by the way, I think the underrated storyline, I'm going to quote Josh Pate on this one. They travel more miles this year than 26 NFL teams, despite the fact that the NFL teams play 3 more away games every year. They're traveling I think it's 26,000 miles this year. They go to Hawaii, they go to LSU, they go to Penn State, they go to Rutgers, they go to Memorial Stadium to play Nebraska. I mean, their shortest trip is, up the coast to Washington. This is a long season for and again, these aren't, bad teams, right? These aren't awful teams that they're going to go play. These are going to be some tough, like, possible jet lag at times, and they don't really string a lot of home games together. In fact, I'm looking at the schedule right now. The only 2 home games they match together would be to finish the season with USC and Fresno State. They don't get a back-to-back home or a chance to really, rah-rah. Even with the bye week, they don't have a home game on either side. I mean, I guess they have at the very beginning, but in the meat of their schedule, their bye week is surrounded by away games. And so it's not even like you get to really hang out in town for more than a couple of weeks. Guys, this is going to be a tough season for UCLA. This is just I think that Deshaun Foster will turn this into something good. But I can't see it right now. There's too many good teams on the schedule. There's not really a good chance to build momentum. I mean, your best chance at building momentum might be, Minnesota Rutgers. But I mean, outside of that, like you're really struggling to find a place where they can really build a winning streak and, feel like they're really doing something good there. You combine that with a new head coach, new culture, bunch of new players, and a lot of travel. It's just going to really mess with the players. And I don't think it's going to be a great year one. I think UCLA is probably the biggest casualty in terms of year one scheduling of this whole new realignment thing. They're probably got the biggest, disadvantage by what their conferences have done to them.
Yeah, there's just no break on that schedule. First year offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy will be interesting to watch. He comes over from the Washington Commanders. So we'll see what he ends up doing. Ethan Garbers is back at quarterback, but again, there's just not one thing that UCLA does really well that I think they're able to get those wins. So UCLA in at 13, according to the Jimmies and the Joes. I think all of us maybe a little bit lower on the Bruins this year. At number 12, Minnesota Golden Gophers come in. They were 122nd in total offense last year, 123rd in passing. Shout out Athan Kaliakmanis. Their defense was what got them at least sort of relevant. I believe Minnesota is one of those teams that went 5-7 last year and then got in based on academics. If I'm not mistaken. Then they beat Bowling Green in the Quick Lane Bowl. But Trey, weird season for Minnesota. And I'm struggling to know where I fall on PJ Fleck and the row the boat mentality, right? I mean, there's been talent coming in and out of Minnesota's program, but there just hasn't been, I think, the level of upper echelon consistency, the 8-9 wins that Minnesota fans were hoping when Fleck first came over. We just haven't seen that kind of extrapolate across his tenure there.
Yeah, and I think you can trace that directly to quarterback play, right? Because I think early on, Tanner Morgan, before he started his 20-year college tenure, he was really good, really consistent. He had some nice wide receivers to throw to, but the transition last year to Athan it just didn't work out. And I know that they had tried to develop him for a few years. They lose Mo Ibrahim last year, who was their entire offense in 2023 or 2022, excuse me. So that transition just didn't work out. But I do like that he went out and tried to fix it because he pulled in Max Brosmer from New Hampshire, led the entire FCS in passing last year. And the entire, their offense was an exact mirror, not a mirror, but an opposite of what Minnesota was doing on offense last year, throwing the ball all over the yard without a lot of effort. So he really looked good in spring ball from all reports. You get Marcus Major from Oklahoma, the running back that joined in January. He should get a lot of touches, and they got some big wide receivers as well. So if they can up the offense, I know their defense, they lost Tyler Nubin from their really good safety. He was selected by the Giants in the draft. But, I mean, if they can keep the defense operating at the level that it has been, they've not been bad on the defensive side of the ball. They've been holding opponents to low scores on that side of the ball. But if they can just get their offense to carry some weight.
As the dog just goes nuts. We'll let you figure out Dolly. I agree though. I think the offense figuring out what to do, and Max Brosmer brings in a lot of hope. We'll see what the defense can step up and do this year. If they can repeat some of the success from last year. Can you believe it's 8 years that PJ Fleck has been
That
in
seems
Minnesota?
unreal. That seems absolutely unreal.
8 years. That means 9 years ago he led Western Michigan to the Cotton Bowl, and that
Yeah.
makes me feel old.
That makes me feel really old. But I think I got my dog outside now, so we're good. But we got the stretch that's going to define the season. I think tough opening part of the conference schedule, especially Iowa at Michigan, USC at home. That's tough. Like that is a tough 3-pack to open the conference schedule. But UCLA through Rutgers is going to determine if they make a bowl game and what type of bowl game they make, because that at UCLA, Maryland at home, at Illinois, at Rutgers, I don't necessarily think any of those games are definite Sharpie in losses, but they've got to go at least 3-1 in those, in my mind, to have confidence going forward, because is PJ Fleck starting to get a little stale? I don't know. I don't have a good pulse for the Minnesota fan base. I think if they miss bowl eligibility again this year, I know they got in last year on the academic qualifying, but if they miss it again this year, that's not what they signed up for when PJ Fleck came over from Western Michigan. So I don't know. We were going to discuss him on the hot seat episode, but ran out of time. I'm really interested if there's any Minnesota fans out there listening, what the pulse is there.
Yeah. We'll see what Minnesota is able to muster. Brosmer is the key to me. Can that offense find a dynamic element? If they can, they go bowling. If not, yeah, I don't know that Fleck is all too comfortable in that head coaching seat. All right, final team for this first episode of the Big Ten preview, number 11. It's the Illinois Fighting Illini. This is a team that maybe has their quarterback in Ole Miss transfer, Luke Altmaier. He was the starter last year, at least for part of the time, then had it yanked away from him. Really couldn't throw the football all that well, threw it to the other guys way too many times, and really was only good for scrambling. He did rack up a number of yards with his legs, but this year he appears to be the guy. He's got a rebuilt offensive line in front of him, and Garrett, I think they have to return to being able to run the football, a la Chase Brown. It's been a couple of years since we've seen him suiting up for the Fighting Illini, but Illinois' over-under at 5.5. This is another tantalizing line. Can you paint the picture that gets Illinois to a bowl game?
Ooh, it's going to be tough. I think here's my thing with Luke Altmaier. I think he's a good quarterback, but he just needs to figure out like kind of the discipline and the mental side of the game, because he's got tools. Like nobody can deny he's got tools. You don't get recruited to Ole Miss if you don't, right? You don't get recruited to go play for Lane Kiffin if you don't have tools. Now he ends up obviously at Illinois, has a, kind of up and down sort of decent year. But I mean, if you really look at the numbers, he's kind of in that Callie McManus group. Like he's not really that far off from where he was. And we'd all say he probably has better tools, but he didn't show it last year. That's really what it is. I think for me, Illinois is going to have to win some games at the end of their schedule if they're going to want to hit this over on the 5.5, because it doesn't necessarily start that hard, but that middle part of the schedule, I think, could be really a problem for them. They have Kansas early. I don't think they probably win that one, but they do get Eastern Illinois, Central Michigan. You can win those games. You go at Nebraska, at Penn State. I'd probably pick them to lose both of those just right off the bat. And then you got to go kind of through this middle part: Purdue, Michigan, at Oregon, and then Minnesota. That's going to be tricky. And so, maybe Minnesota, you can win that game. But then you really got to win those last couple, Michigan State, at Rutgers, and then Northwestern. And there's not a lot of margin for error there, which is kind of the problem for Illinois, is because the error is kind of the problem with them, right? They don't play consistent football. You can see, flashes of, hey, this could be a really good team, or like, hey, this offense, it could really get rolling. They just don't show it enough. They'll string a couple good plays together and then, chuck it up to the free safety. And so it's going to have to be more consistent. You're going to have to see Altmaier take a step in terms of his mental side of the game, not throwing the ball into trouble, not, being too aggressive with it. Yeah, taking off and running sometimes. And you're going to have to see, like you were saying, Mitch, a big step up in the run game. You're going to have to see I was looking back at the numbers. Their leading rusher, not on the roster anymore, ran for 567 yards. You're going to have to run for more yards than that in the Big Ten. I'm sorry. That's just what you're going to have to do, especially when you get a couple of these tricky road games when you're talking about at Nebraska, at Penn State, at Oregon. You can't pass the ball as effectively on the road. You're going to have to run it. You're just going to have to run the football. And those are some pretty good defenses to stop the run. So you're going to have to figure some stuff out in a hurry if you want to have a good season. I'm not saying it's impossible, but press X to doubt, right? I'm going to go ahead and doubt that they're going to hit that 5.5 this year.
Yeah, Caden Fegan is the featured running back this year. They're confident in the stable and the ability to accrue yards on the ground with a couple of backs, but Fagan's obviously the featured back. Sophomore running back, had over 400 yards last year, missed the last couple of games with injury. If the offensive line can be better, and they think that both of their tackles, who are both transfers, one from Georgia and Melvin Priestley, and then J.C. Davis comes in from New Mexico, they think both of them have NFL futures. So hopefully Altmaier is able to step up into the pocket a little bit more, be more poised, more composed. But I'm with you. I just, without being able to trust one aspect of the offense, and certainly the quarterback, with as poor as Altmaier was at times last year, 10 interceptions thrown in limited action, I have a really tough time believing that they're going to overcome a schedule as difficult as theirs. I will say this, though. If Illinois makes the bowl game, it's going to be a heck of a run down their last 4 games, right? They've got Minnesota, a bye week, Michigan State, at Rutgers, versus Northwestern. They're going to need to win maybe all of those games to reach a bowl game. So Illinois could be one of the most fascinating programs to watch at the end of the season if Brett Bielema is able to put it all together. They did lose 12 players to the portal right after the spring game, though. So, a program that's playing from behind the chains, I think, on multiple aspects. We'll see if Illinois can make a bowl game.
I want to say this real quick. To that point, you have seen teams get hot because they're desperate to the end of the season, right? Like if they know that they have a stretch at the end of the year, you've seen this, but like to further emphasize the running game point, like they have to run the football. It really seems like Brett Bielema's career has been based on like good running backs, right? Like yes, Chase Brown, but even go back to like guys like Alex Collins. Obviously, like these are guys that like almost made his career because they could just tote the rock. Somebody's got to step up in that running back room. I don't believe it's going to be able to get it done with the committee.
We'll see. Fighting Illini are a lot of fun when they're plucky in the Big Ten. Will they be that this season? We will have to see. All right, well, that's going to do it for this first episode of the Big Ten preview. And we've got teams 10 through 6 coming out on Wednesday. Like and subscribe to the channel for free to get all of our preview episodes right there in your feed. We're excited to have you along this ride with us. For Trey Reeves and Garrett Turney, I'm Mitch Mason. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. Until next time, so long, everybody.
Gracious hip.